Formula One, a sport founded in 1950, is approaching its 75th anniversary. And throughout all that time, it has never been safe from controversies, scandals, and other uncomfortable but inevitable situations in a world as competitive and political as the Grand Circus. We've already covered multiple Formula One scandals. Today, we'll discuss the 10 teams currently in the top category. And each one has a tale. Some are stepped on, some bigger than others. Teams like Renault, McLaren, and Mercedes have done this repeatedly. They have been involved in scandals that have tarnished their team's image or led to grave consequences. And today we start with a new mini-series on this channel, which will be one where we will tell you about the biggest scandals that each Formula One team has gotten into. We'll look at the team's biggest media scandals that have had significant consequences in some way. And to start with this mini-series, how about if we talk to you about the most successful team in the history of Formula One, as well as the one with the most history, practically being there since the first season in Formula One. Therefore, there is a lot to dig through to find the biggest scandals of Scuderia Ferrari in this mini-series. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the top 5 of the biggest scandals of Scuderia Ferrari. History cannot be hidden. The 5th spot on this list is a story already covered on this channel. Caused by Scuderia Ferrari, it was so media-driven that it managed to change the rules of Formula One twice. The story begins in the 2002 Formula One season at the former A1 ring circuit in Austria. This set the stage for the impending controversy. At that time, Ferrari's clear number 1 driver was Michael Schumacher, with Rubens Barrichello as the number 2 driver, practically being his squire. Since joining the Italian team, Schumacher had won 4 of the 5 Grand Prix races this season, finishing 3rd in Malaysia, and he was already 21 points ahead of his pursuer in the driver's table, who was none other than the Colombian Juan Pablo Montoya. There were many races left, and it was clearly seen who was the favorite to be the champion in that season. However, Ferrari still got entangled in an entirely avoidable controversy. During that Austrian Grand Prix, Rubens had been superior to the Kaiser all weekend. He qualified. In the pole position and in the race, no matter how much he attacked the first position, Rubens was not giving in. However, during the last laps, Rubens received a radio message with a clear and uncomfortable order. They asked him to do the same as the previous year. Give his position to Schumacher to help extend his lead in the World Drivers' Championship. For a moment it seemed that Rubens hesitated, but he ended up giving his position to his teammate, despite the fact that he had been superior to him throughout the whole weekend. Schumacher won the race with his team order from Ferrari, who prioritized the team and the drivers' championship fight. However, this decision was not well received by the circuit fans, who quickly booed them at the end of the race, deeming the order wholly unnecessary, taking into account the point difference that Schumacher already had on the board, in addition to the fact that there were still several races left on the calendar. The booing was constant and intense, and the image on the podium was completely shameful. The booing did not stop, and Michael Schumacher tried to somewhat fix the situation, acknowledging the Brazilian as the true winner, making him stand on the highest step of the podium and giving Rubens the winner's trophy. However, this did not serve to alleviate tensions, as the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile summoned Ferrari staff to explain the reason for the order to Barrichello. And above all, why had they made all that circus on the podium, completely breaking the established protocol? Ferrari's defense remained the same. Were they favoring Schumacher for the World Drivers' Championship? They maintained their stance despite constant claims from journalists, former drivers, and motorsport fans. However, despite the criticism, Ferrari had not violated any guidelines with the team order they carried out. But they were fined €1 million for breaking the podium protocols, when Schumacher wanted in a way to return the favor to his teammate. However, all the media uproar caused by that order made it so that from the year 2003, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile Régulation changed to prohibit any team order that interfered with the outcome of a competition. So, even though Ferrari continued using orders in the year 2002, the action they took on the A1 ring circuit had changed Formula One. Although this wouldn't be forever. In 2010, Ferrari was involved in another team orders controversy. But to tell you this story, we have to go back to the last laps of the 2010 German Grand Prix, where on this occasion the Ferrari drivers were Felipe Massa from Brazil and Fernando Alonso from Spain. And in that season, Fernando was the best positioned to fight for the title on behalf of the prancing horse. But that Grand Prix was being led by Felipe Massa, and even though his teammate was faster, he couldn't overtake him, no matter how hard he tried. This only made Fernando start to reproach his team over the radio, saying that he was much faster than the Brazilian on the track. And shortly after this communication, Massa was informed in a very unorthodox way. Okay? And after these words, the moment of controversy would arise. Massa let Alonso pass. Fernando is faster than you. It had been a clear team order that Ferrari tried to camouflage, but did so in a terrible way. Fernando won that Grand Prix. But immediately afterwards, in the press conference, the journalists went for his throat with questions like, "Would you put this race on the same status as Singapore? 2008? Or, some even told him the reality is that Massa was faster than you, and you couldn't pass him on the track." The press has gone for Fernando Alonso's throat over what happened with that. Fernando is faster than you. The problem with all this is that, unlike the year 2002, team orders were completely banned. Precisely after what happened with Schumacher and Barrichello at the Austrian circuit. And with that little phrase, Fernando is faster than you, did they risk being excluded from the Grand Prix if it was proven that that little phrase was a team order? Ferrari was summoned by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to the World Motorsport Council, accused of violating Article 39.1 of the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile's sporting regulations, which states that team orders that interfere with the outcome of a race cannot be given. Ferrari's defense, voiced by Stefano Domenicali, was that they never gave a team order. Rather, it was more that he had voluntarily let Fernando pass. And although for a moment there was speculation about a 5-second penalty for Fernando Alonso, so that Massa could regain the victory or even take away the points obtained by Ferrari in that Grand Prix. In the end, the action was very cheap for the prancing horse team, as the only punishment they received was a fine of 100,000 euros that the team received for the infraction committed with that team order. And that in the end, in fact, resulted in the elimination of the same rule that Ferrari had provoked 8 years before this Grand Prix. But all the fuss it stirred up and the subsequent consequences and the changes to the regulations mean that the 5th place in this top goes to it. Ferrari's team orders at the Austrian Grand Prix in 2002, and Germany in the year 2010. The next New Krunta scandal involves the 7-time German world champion, in one of the most unsportsmanlike actions in the history of the top category, and another stain on his record full of similar situations. This story takes us back to 2006. And in context, we were living a fierce battle for the driver's title between Fernando Alonso from Renault and the Kaiser from Ferrari, where after the Spanish Grand Prix, both had shared most of the victories. Up to that point, Alonso had won 3 Grand Prix, Schumacher 2. In the driver's standings, Alonso led with 54 points while the Kaiser had 39. So he urgently needed to win again to cut points in the fight that was taking place. And what could mean his 8th World Drivers' Championship? Arriving at the Monaco Grand Prix, expectations were high as Ferrari aimed to beat Renault on a circuit with no overtaking opportunities. A fitting description of the multi-champion, more crucial than ever. During the final minutes of the qualifying round, Schumacher was ahead of Alonso, but he on his last lap was making up enough time to snatch the pole position from him. Until someone conveniently made a mistake on the La Rascasse curve. With this mistake, Schumacher caused yellow flags that practically made no one able to improve their last record. Among them, Fernando Alonso, relegating him to the 2nd position and where Michael Schumacher would virtually have the pole position, in the face of everyone who couldn't believe what was happening. Accusations that he did it intentionally would soon follow. Staff from other teams and other drivers questioned the sportsmanship of the Kaiser, who defended himself by saying that he simply made a mistake. But the other teams in the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile didn't fully believe him, partly due to a claim from the Renault team. During the night, Ferrari had to respond to accusations that Schumacher had parked his car at Raskas to prevent anyone from being able to beat his time, on a circuit where the first position gives you 95% of the race. And Ferrari turned to defend Schumacher, saying his move was an accident. But those who protested criticized him for the constant countersteering that the driver had done, completely unnecessary when taking the turn. So, after so much controversy and deliberation, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile would have to decide whether to sanction Schumacher or let him get away with the maneuver, coming to the conclusion that his action was deliberate, avoidable, and therefore he was responsible for parking his car on the Raskas curve. To prevent his qualifying time from being lowered and thus be able to start from the pole position. And the punishment would be very harsh because they would have to send Schumacher to start from the pit lane on a circuit as difficult to overtake as Monaco. The punishment was brutal. Despite Schumacher finishing 5th, Fernando Alonso won the competition. Taking an even bigger lead in his particular fight against the Kaiser, what could his second world championship mean to him? But the real defeat for Ferrari was that both they and their driver were accused of cheating due to a very unfortunate action of their greatest legend, which, unfortunately, were not the only controversial situations the German experienced during his time with the Ferrari team. Position number 4, the classification of the Monaco Grand Prix and Schumacher parking at the Raskas curve. In the year 2006. The story of Didier Pironi and Gilles Villeneuve is one of betrayals, battle, and a tragic ending, worthy of one of the most controversial stories in the world of Formula One, and above all, of the Ferrari team. The scandal did not originate from them, but its repercussions impacted them directly, and... Putting it into context, Ferrari was not world champion in 1982, but they had a solid and lethal duo that combined an aggressive monster of the track, like Gilles Villeneuve, and a sprinter with an excellent pace like Didier Pironi. However, in 1982, Ferrari designed the 126 C2, a very competitive car. That could give Ferrari the world title they had not been able to achieve after the 79 crown obtained by Jody Scheckter. However, Ferrari's first 3 races that season were disastrous. First, they had a double withdrawal in South Africa. In the second race in Brazil, Gilles Villeneuve crashed. In the third race at Long Beach, Didier Pironi had an accident, and Gilles Villeneuve was disqualified for technical issues with his wings. The Italian team had a disappointing season with few points, despite high expectations. And the pressures would only increase as Ferrari was wasting another opportunity to be champions. However, the 4th date of the World Championship, one of Ferrari's hunting races, would come. To be run at the racetrack that bears the name of the sun, who created the mythical brand? The San Marino Grand Prix, on the circuit formerly known as Autodromo Dino Ferrari in Imola. The outlook was bleak, as Ferrari had been experiencing a significant lack of success. The Grand Prix was boycotted by the Formula One Constructors Association, the Formula One Teams Association, as part of one of the existing battles in the war between Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile and Formula One Constructors Association. The protest was due to the team's disqualification, Brabant in Brazil, resulting in the non-participation of British teams Brabant, McLaren, Williams, and Lotus, with only 7 teams racing. The Renaults had qualified 1st and 2nd for this Grand Prix, but during the race the cars ended up failing, leaving the 2, Ferrari leading the home Grand Prix, with Gilles Villeneuve 1st and Didier Pironi 2nd. From the Ferrari box, seeing the situation, they ordered their drivers to reduce speed to minimize any risk of abandonment. A clear team order that they should stay in the positions they were in and finish the Grand Prix that way. However, Gilles regained the 1st position, despite the slow orders that had been sent from the wall. Pironi disobeyed his team, and with a risky maneuver on lap 52, he took the lead from his teammate, who, in fact, had obeyed the order to go slower and more carefully that had been given from the wall. At that moment, Villeneuve was in disbelief. Despite his best efforts to regain the lead through fighting, his teammate defended aggressively, not allowing him to retake 1st place. So now Villeneuve would disobey his team's order and would aggressively attack to regain the lead. And 2 laps from the end, Villeneuve attacks him on the outside of the Tosa curve, but Pironi doesn't seem to want to defend himself, allowing Villeneuve to take the lead of the Grand Prix. This made the Canadian believe his teammate had let him pass, and that perhaps all these maneuvers that took place were simply to put on a show for the spectators, causing him to let his guard down. And Pironi took advantage of that too, on the final lap, stick his car in the Tosa curve and snatch the position to regain the lead. And since this maneuver happened on the last lap, Villeneuve wouldn't have another chance to regain the position on a circuit where overtaking is practically impossible. And with that maneuver, Didier secured the Grand Prix victory. Where, in fact, some Formula One experts consider that overtaking as one of the biggest scandals in the history of Formula One, basically because of the context that surrounds it. After the Grand Prix, Villeneuve was furious with his teammate for disobeying team orders, as he had respected them himself, and his teammate decided to completely ignore it, feeling betrayed by both Didier Pironi and his team. Since none of the figures of Ferrari, like Enzo himself or Marco Piccinini, the team boss of Ferrari, said anything about Didier's actions. After that competition, Didier defended himself by saying that he saw the slow sign, and that for him this was simply a warning that they should be more careful on the track. Not as such a team order. Therefore, he felt free to battle, although Gilles didn't believe in this excuse at all, saying that he would now go to war against Pironi and would do things entirely on his own. Noticing the team's tension, he refrained from intervening in the confrontation. And the tension within Ferrari escalated until the next race to be held at the Solder circuit in Belgium. As I told you, Ferrari did not put any limit to the confrontation, and during the qualification of that race, Pironi had set a pole time that Gilles could not lower, no matter how much he was trying. Lap by lap, he was breaking his wrists and pushing his car to the limit in an attempt to beat his teammate, unaware that this was about to not only cost him the race, but in fact, the Canadian driver's life. Driven by fury and desperation, Villeneuve pushed himself to the limit, coming face to face with death. A horrific accident caused by his own mistake in trying to overtake a slower driver immediately ended the life of the pilot, all because of his need to settle scores for what he considered as the betrayal of his teammate and his team. In the end, this rivalry was short, but completely tragic and deadly. This internal situation at Ferrari is remembered as one of the biggest scandals they have ever been involved in. The incident, which ended fatally for the driver, was a result of the fury he harbored after the events at the Imola circuit. After this, Ferrari chose not to participate in the Belgium and Germany Grand Prix races. Didier Pironi's accident left him with multiple fractures, forcing him to permanently retire from Formula One racing. In Ferrari's collective memory, was what happened in Imola more energetic? Could the scandal that ultimately ended the life of the protege have been avoided? Dents in Didier's career. Of what is considered one of the most scandalous, controversial, and tragic seasons in the history of the Ferrari team. So, I've put number 2 on our top. The drama of the 1982 season and the deadly rivalry between Didier Pironi and Gilles Villeneuve. Ferrari is the only team that has existed since 1950 and the early years of Formula One. They had already achieved the ultimate championship success in the years 1952, 1953, 1956, and 1958. However, during this first decade of Formula One, the cars in the category remained virtually immovable with their technical regulations. But would that change for the year 1961? The year when Ferrari designed the 156 with a particular shark nose design, which was a highly competitive car, with which Ferrari dominated the season. But that year, Wolfgang Bontriebs from Germany and Phil Hill from the United States were locked in an intense battle for the driver's title. Phil Hill won the Belgian Grand Prix and secured podium finishes in Monaco, Netherlands, Great Britain, and Germany, while the German driver had achieved 2 victories in the season in the Netherlands and Great Britain, and a couple more podiums at the Belgium and Germany circuits. After the German race, Wolfgang Bontriebs led the driver's standings by just 4 points, with 2 races remaining in the World Championship. And the penultimate round of that 1961 World Championship would be run at the legendary Monza circuit. The circuit saw 2 championships at stake that could be crowned: the Drivers' Championship and the Constructors' Championship, which Ferrari could win on their home ground. But to do that, they would have to beat the Lotus team and deliver a blow that would not allow them to catch up in the last race of the year, at the Watkins Glen circuit. Moreover, Von Trips could become world champion by defeating Phil Hill in this race. The Italian Grand Prix began with the Lotus drivers led by Jim Clark, taking the lead after a strong start. Von Trips had fallen in the rankings after a bad start, but he began to gradually regain pace and with it positions. He swiftly pursued Graham Hill, Jack Brabant, and Jim Clark to compete for fourth place. However, on the second lap of the Italian Grand Prix, scheduled for 50 laps, when Von Trips goes to overtake on the straight after the first oval curve, Formula One would witness its greatest tragedy. In an overtaking attempt by the German Jim Clark, Wolfgang's car has a slight touch with the British one, but the speed at which they were going at that moment causes him to lose control, and Sudo is thrown directly into the audience who came to watch the race. The pilot was ejected and died instantly upon impact in the crash. But the tragedy, in addition to the death of the pilot and world title contender, is that 14 civilians died in that accident. Despite this tragedy, the race did not stop and continued normally. In fact, the American Phil Hill won the Grand Prix, which, with the points and with the death of Von Trips, automatically made him and Ferrari world champions in the worst possible way. However, despite the scandal, what had happened on the track also came after the race, with the horrible management that Ferrari did after the incident. First, the Italian press and the team blamed Jim Clark for the accident, holding him responsible and blaming him for his driving that caused the maneuver that ended with Von Trips dead. Ferrari announced they would not compete in the final Grand Prix of the year in the United States, out of respect for their driver. However, Phil Hill, already crowned world champion after Von Trips' death, felt the decision was wrong. So he immediately accused them of being hypocrites, asserting that if they had not won the World Drivers and Constructors titles, they would have gone to race in the United States. Regardless of what happened to their German driver, practically using the tragedy as an excuse not to make that trip. However, regardless of what the drivers said, Ferrari maintained their stance and did not compete in the last race of the year. As a final gesture, Enzo Ferrari also ordered the destruction of the Ferrari 156, the car Hill had used to win the Drivers' Championship. Some people say he did this out of guilt for the Monza tragedy, but others attribute it to the departure of engineer Carlo Sidi, who had left the team due to differences with the commander, and in revenge he had decided to destroy the car, considering his former engineer a traitor. The situation escalated to the point where it's said that the car's remains were buried in Maranello, only that to date the true story is not known and we probably will never know. Despite the scandal that occurred where Enzo believed that his engineer had betrayed him, we probably will never know the true story. But what we do know is that the 1961 season, which should be remembered highly by this team, is stained by betrayal, blood, and a completely terrible damage management from the team that had managed to conquer Formula One that season. So, position number 2, the tragic 1961 season of Scuderia Ferrari. In the gold of our top, we have the biggest scandal in which Scuderia Ferrari has been involved. Because what happened in the 2019 season is something that haunted this Scuderia for many years. It weighed them down, and to date nothing has been clarified about the scandal of their engine. And look, during that campaign, 2019, from the first races of the year we saw Mercedes in domination mode for much of the first 12 races. Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton, and Valtteri Bottas won 10 of the first 12 races. As was customary since the 2014 season, they had the best and most powerful engine on the grid. However, after the summer break at the Belgian Grand Prix, the tables had turned dramatically. Suddenly, Ferrari had an engine that exceeded the power of the Mercedes. The speed they were deploying on a qualifying lap was brutal, and their race pace wasn't bad either, and only challenging them a few times in 2019. Now they had arrived at the Belgium circuit and had won it with Charles Leclerc, being practically invincible on the straights. However, this very act heightened the suspicions of all teams, which were indeed confirmed in the subsequent competition. At the Italy circuit, where, once again, Ferrari showed more power. At the circuit where it matters most in Monza, where Leclerc managed to win again, but where the teams would start to seek explanations with the International Automobile Federation to find a logical answer as to where Ferrari had gotten so much power all of a sudden. Toto Wolff, the team principal of Mercedes, dropped his suspicions when he stated Honda, Renault, and we are practically in the same boat. And only Ferrari stands out, and sometimes it does so dramatically. Christian Horner, Red Bull's team principal, was more direct as he fought with them for second place in the Constructors' Championship. And he stated that they were the ones who complained to the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile about the situation with Ferrari's power unit, and that they sent their suspicions to the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile. Also stating that Ferrari had about 40 kilowatts more power than the other teams, which translated into approximately 54 more horsepower than their opponents. And the accusations simply did not stop, as Horner and Wolff continued to pick at the wound for several weeks after the Italian Grand Prix. Horner accused that the speed and quality and the power difference was very evident compared to them. And in the end, Renault also joined in the accusations against Ferrari's power unit. But then at that moment, everyone was wondering why the sudden change in competitiveness of that power unit? And quickly, two theories developed about what Ferrari was doing. I'll tell you in advance, both were illegal. The first theory explains that Formula One cars have a sensor that measures the amount of fuel passing from the single-seater tank to the engine. Limited to 0.98 ounces each test, Ferrari had leveraged this to their benefit. The frequency of the fuel meter to, between measurements, add more fuel to the power unit, and that the sensor would not detect that extra fuel. The other theory is that Ferrari was introducing oil into the combustion chamber through the intercooler, burning it to generate extra power that gave them that speed. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile had specified that both techniques were illegal, and the theories were about one of these two options. However, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile decided to investigate the matter after complaints from rivals, adding fuel to the fire. Once the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile began investigating the engine power, Ferrari magically had disappeared for the United States and Mexico Grand Prix. In the United States, they had a very modest result compared to what they had been having in previous races. Verstappen mocked Ferrari, suggesting their poor result in Austin was due to not cheating. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile investigated the Ferrari engine in November that year. But the season concluded while the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile was still deliberating whether Ferrari's power unit was legal or not. But what followed next, when the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile spoke up, became even more suspicious, bringing the matter to the attention of the entire world. On the last day of the preseason, 2020, the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile announced it had finished investigating the engine and privately settled with the team, without disclosing details to the public. So this investigation neither confirmed nor denied the legality of the engine, or if there was any illegality in it. Thanks to this private agreement, this was now a simple matter between the International Automobile Federation and Scuderia Ferrari. Obviously, the rest of the teams did not take the resolution well, and all the teams, except for those powered by Ferrari. In a letter, they asked the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile to clarify what had happened, writing in the statement, to be surprised and shocked by the investigation, and demanding accountability and transparency in the situation, and the full and proper disclosure of this matter. The teams wanted to pressure the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile for answers, but the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile did not fold its arms and did not fall to the team's threats. Rumors suggest that the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile found something illegal in that engine, but lacked the tools to prove it. Soon after, the teams chose to stop discussing the issue and accept the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile's decision. So we will never know what happened with the engine issue. But the biggest suspicions were reignited when the 2020 Ferrari proved to be a pathetic car in terms of performance, weighed down by a lack of power. As again, among rumors, it is said that Ferrari had to redesign its engine, and in the process they lost power, which made the 2020 season an absolute disaster by Italian standards. But the way this situation was resolved, the consequences, and the fact that there was never a clear answer, leaves this as the biggest scandal in the history of the Ferrari team, and the #1 spot on our top of the day today. With this, we conclude the first chapter of this mini-series on Formula One team scandals. But this is where I ask you, did you know about these scandals? What did you think of the stories we told you today? And which team would you like to be the focus of the next chapter of Formula One team scandals? Let me know all your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up before I say goodbye. Subscribe to this channel, enable notifications to know when I upload new videos, and share this with your friends. Also, I invite you to follow us on our Instagram and Twitter accounts, whose link will be in the description of this video. And see you soon for more content on this, your Skyline Racing channel. Thank you for tuning in and see you later. Thank you.